a pair of scissors, a lock of hair cut. A 13-year-old boy who didn't shout, but made an entire school go silent. This isn't just a story about bullying. It's the moment everything changed. Under the blazing Monday morning sun in Plano, Texas, Jaylen Carter stepped onto the campus of Riverview Middle School with a worn-out backpack slung over his shoulder and a dented metal lunchbox, his trusty companion since 5th grade. He was 13, quiet, self-possessed, and no stranger being a new kid. Thanks to the frequent moves tied to his father's work helping veterans reintegrate into civilian life. But even with that experience, Jaylen could feel the different kind of attention surrounding him from the moment he walked down the first hallway. His hair was the first thing people noticed. Long dreadlocks, neatly twisted and tied back. Not flashy, not demanding attention. Jaylen was simply himself. Plain t-shirt, clean khaki pants, white sneakers, and earbuds from the bus ride over. He sat alone in history class, with the seat beside him empty, until a curly-haired girl named Olivia leaned over and softly said, "I like your hair." Jaylen nodded slightly, offering a quiet thank you with his eyes. In the cafeteria, he chose a seat near the vending machines, an unclaimed space where he could observe the layout like someone navigating a maze. He wasn't looking for friends. He was reading the school's unspoken language. Who called the shots, who got avoided, and who acted as the social police. Those who decided everyone else's worth. He figured it out on day one. Riverview had an unwritten rule book, and at the center of that social cyclone stood a blonde-haired boy named Cody Palmer, an 8th grader, son of a prominent local car dealership owner. Cody had a half-smile that always felt a little too confident, a voice louder than necessary, and a group of boys who trailed him like a backup chorus, waiting for their cue to chime in. Jaylen didn't react. He didn't look down, but he could feel it. He was already in Cody's sights. What Cody didn't know, though, was that the boy he'd just chosen as a potential punchline wasn't the kind to back into corners easily. That evening, Jaylen sat on the front porch, his back against an old wooden pillar, eyes tracing the soft glow of the streetlight spilling onto a quiet road in East Plano. In his hand was a crumpled note, his mom's message tucked into his lunchbox. "Just be yourself. That's enough." The cursive letters were gentle, like her warm voice, but the tightness left by the first day still lingered inside him like a chill without a name. His father, Richard Carter, was wiping down a pair of worn leatherwork shoes beneath the porch light. Once a Marine, now a reintegration specialist for fellow veterans, he carried himself with calm certainty, his eyes always seeming to scan something beyond what was in front of him. "How was the first day?" he asked, not looking up. Jaylen shrugged, hesitating just a moment before answering. "It was fine. A few looks, a couple comments. Nothing major." Mr. Richard looked up, setting the brush down. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a quiet authority. "You don't have to stay silent when someone disrespects you. But don't let them define you by their stares or their snide remarks either. You have every right to be anywhere, head held high." Jaylen nodded slightly, though the weight inside him didn't lift. He wasn't afraid. He was tired. Tired of starting over. Tired of always having to read the room. Measure other people's emotions just to decide whether to smile or stay silent. His mother, Latasha, stepped outside with a mug of hot cocoa. "You've made it through places harder than this, Jay," she said, sitting down beside him. "Plano's just another stop. But wherever you go, your hair, the way you walk, how you can hold a room without saying a word, those things are strength." Jaylen gripped the mug. He didn't say anything, but their words, his mother's and father's, quietly began to settle inside him like anchors, because he knew tomorrow Cody Palmer wouldn't stop. And next time, it might not just be words. On Tuesday at lunch, Jaylen chose the same familiar spot, the last table by the window, where he could watch the schoolyard and stay out of the spotlight cast by the so-called power crowd in the center of the cafeteria. He was quietly chewing on his peanut butter and banana sandwich, his mom's Tuesday tradition, when loud laughter erupted from a few tables ahead. "Yo, Jaylen, is your hair a Wi-Fi antenna or just a bird repellent?" The whole corner of the cafeteria burst into laughter. Cody Palmer again. He sat with his usual gang, Carson, Tyler, and a kid who thought he could skateboard but hadn't landed a trick in his life. Feet propped up like they owned the place. Jaylen looked up, His gaze not angry, not rattled, just still like a lake before the storm. He set his sandwich down, calmly pulled his earbuds from their case, and slipped them in. A soft jazz instrumental filled his ears, just enough to drown out the noise, just enough to carry his thoughts elsewhere. But Cody wasn't done. He strutted over, napkin balled in his hand, and with a flick, splat, it hit Jaylen's tray. Juice spilled across the tray and soaked into the front of his shirt. Oops. Little accident there, Mr. Cool. Jaylen exhaled slowly, dabbing his shirt with a napkin, saying nothing. But it was that silence, the calm, that threw Cody off. It was like performing a comedy skit and realizing the audience wasn't laughing. Across the cafeteria, a group of kids was playing chess. A short Asian boy glanced at Jaylen, then turned back to board and slid his knight forward, as if he'd just learned something from that moment of restraint. As the bell rang to signal the end of lunch, Jaylen stood up, his tray still half full. He turned to look at Cody for just 1 second. No fear, no resentment, then turned and walked away. Behind him, Carson whispered, "Yo, did you see that?" It's like he didn't even care. Cody shrugged, but something shifted inside. A joke doesn't land if the target doesn't react. And Jaylen? He didn't just ignore it. He made Cody feel like the joke was on him. The story wasn't over. But this time, the audience was starting to shift seats. On Wednesday afternoon, Riverview Olivia Middle School buzzed with energy, especially during gym class. That day, Coach Reynolds split the class into 2 teams for basketball. The polished gym floor gleamed under bright LED lights from above, making every movement pop in sharp detail. When the name Jaylen was called onto the court, more than a few eyes turned his way. Cody was on the opposing team. His brand-new sneakers squeaked dramatically on hardwood as he dribbled, his eyes throwing a message. "Today I'm teaching you a lesson." Jaylen didn't respond. He simply tightened his laces, adjusted his wristband, and stepped onto the court. No flash, no flex, but the way he stood, shoulders back, gaze focused, made even his teammates sense something different. The game kicked off. Cody wasted no time taking center stage. Fancy crossovers, long-range shots, trash talk in full volume. "Can't stop this, Jay." Jaylen stayed silent. But on Cody's third drive, just as he was about to coast in for an easy layup, Jaylen sprang up and blocked the shot clean. The ball rocketed back across half court, and a chorus of "whoa" erupted from the sidelines. "Dang, Jaylen can play," someone shouted. Coach Reynolds whistled from across the court. "Nice defense, Carter." Cody scowled. "Lucky shot," he muttered, but the flicker in his eyes told Jaylen he'd knocked something loose. Cody's rhythm. Jaylen kept playing, no showboating, no smug grins like the others. Crisp passes, smart off-ball movement, setting screens that helped his team score. By the final whistle, he wasn't the top scorer, but he was the one the class clapped for as he walked off the court. Coach Reynolds patted him on the shoulder. "You got a calm game, smart and sharp." Cody was the last to leave the court, shirt damp with sweat, glancing sidelong at Jaylen. But this time, he said nothing, not because he respected him, but because he had nothing left to say. Jaylen tucked his water bottle into his backpack and let a quiet smile rise to his face. He didn't need to shout to be heard. He just let the court see it. Real strength isn't in the dunk. It's in how you keep your rhythm, even when someone's trying to throw you off beat. The next day in Riverview Olivia's cafeteria, the clatter of aluminum trays filled the air like usual. The smell of frozen pizza, orange drink, and deep-fried sausage hung heavy. Jaylen stood at the end of the lunch line, hoodie gray and backpack worn, quietly picked out a salad, and made his way to his usual table near the vending machine. It seemed like just another day, until Cody and his crew scraped their chairs noisily into place at the next table over. "Yo, Jaylen, you tried to be some kind of hero yesterday?" Carson blurted, his voice a mix of mockery and something more uneasy. Jaylen didn't respond. He kept eating, his movements slow and steady, just like every other day. But when Carson pretended to trip and spilled his soda all over Jaylen's tray, something shifted. The entire cafeteria fell silent for a moment. Cody smirked, assuming he just scored another point for his team. Jaylen stared at the spreading puddle on his tray, then calmly wiped it up with a napkin, still without a word. Then he stood, tray in hand, and walked straight to the center table, the one only the popular kids usually dare to sit at. And he sat down. A small whoa escaped from somewhere in the room. Cody scowled. "Hey, who said you could sit there?" Jaylen looked up, voice soft as breeze but hard as steel. "Is there a name on it?" A few students giggled. Not because Jaylen was trying to be funny, but because someone had finally said what everyone was thinking. Right then, Jamal, a seventh grader who had once been mocked by Cody for stuttering, stood up from his corner table, picked up his tray, and quietly sat next to Jaylen. Then came a girl with fiery red curls. Then another student. No words were spoken, just the sound of chairs sliding and trays setting down. The exclusive table had been claimed. Cody watched in disbelief. "What's wrong with them?" he muttered. Jaylen simply bowed his head and resumed eating. No shouting, no smug grin, just presence. Because change doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it enters quietly, just loud enough to make the noisy ones take notice. And now, the whole cafeteria was learning how to listen again. The first week at Riverview hadn't exactly been smooth, but Jaylen was finding his rhythm. That is, until something happened that he couldn't stay silent about. That afternoon after gym class, the locker room buzzed with the usual chaos. The thud of shoes on tile, the snap of water bottle caps, and the hollow bravado of boys trying too hard to prove themselves in their small, sweaty kingdom. Jaylen sat in the far corner, opening his locker. He unwrapped his wristbands and wiped his face with an old towel. He hadn't said much all practice, just played, did his part. But that quiet, that calm, made Cody lose it. "Hey, Jay!" Cody's voice cut in from behind as he approached, casually spinning something in his hand. A pair of scissors. Jaylen turned, brow furrowed, alert. Cody held the scissors up to eye level like a trophy. "I think it's time to trim that bird's nest on your head." There was a ripple of low chuckles from the others nearby. Carson laughed too, but stopped when he caught Jaylen's gaze. That look, unblinking, steady, shut him up. Jaylen said nothing. He met Cody's eyes, still and firm. But before he could move, it happened. Snip! A single lock of Jaylen's hair fell to the ground. Cody had lifted the scissors and actually cut it. One of the dreadlocks Jaylen had been growing since 5th grade. Cut! Just like that. It wasn't a joke anymore. It was an attack. And the room froze. Jaylen shot to his feet, the calm in his eyes gone. It wasn't rage, not the explosive kind, but a deep, personal pain, the kind that cuts without bleeding. He bent down, picked up the severed dreadlock, his fingers trembling. "Are you insane?" Another student blurted out. Cody gave a crooked smirk, but something flickered in his eyes. Uncertainty, maybe even fear. Jaylen took a step forward. He didn't yell. He didn't raise a fist. He just spoke, his voice firm and unshaking. "Don't ever touch me again." A ripple of silence tore through the locker room. Not from the sound, but from the weight of something that could no longer be ignored. The strength in his voice wasn't loud. It was sharp and final. Coach Reynolds walked in at that exact moment. His eyes scanned the floor, saw the lock of hair, the scissors, in Jaylen's face. "What's going on in here?" An 8th grader near the locker stammered. "Cody?" Cody cut Jaylen's hair, Coach, with scissors. It wasn't an accident. Coach Reynolds turned to Cody, his face flushing red. "You brought scissors into the locker room? You think this is a game?" Cody tried to speak, but no one stepped up to defend him. Jaylen, still eerily calm, held up the lock of his own hair. "I've been growing this for 3 years. It's part of who I am. You don't get to take it just because you don't like it." He stepped forward and placed the dreadlock in Coach Reynolds' hand, his grip tightening. "I want to speak to the principal. Right now." No one laughed. No one moved. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, ruptured by something sacred being violated. And Cody, who had always thought he controlled the story, found himself pushed back, not by fists, not by shouting, but by a boy who stood tall in the eye of a storm. Within 5 minutes, Assistant Principal Mrs. Grayson arrived. When she heard what happened, she didn't try to smooth it over. Cody, you're coming with me. Bring the scissors. Jaylen remained still after they left. A few students stepped closer, hesitantly. Jaylen, I don't even know what to say. One boy whispered. Jaylen nodded once. Just don't stay quiet next time. No one said another word, but they knew a line had been crossed, and no one in that room would be the same after that. The principal's office that morning was quiet, eerily quiet. Jaylen sat between his parents, hands clenched in his lap, eyes fixed on the whiteboard across the room. His hair was uneven. Several dreadlocks had been crudely cut and now sat in a Ziploc bag on the table, undeniable evidence of what had happened. He didn't cry. He wasn't angry. He was just silent. Cody sat across from him, shoulders hunched, eyes darting between the principal and the lawyer his family had rushed in. His parents, dressed in sharp suits, faces carved in stone, were doing their best to reframe the incident as a prank that went too far. There was no malicious intent, Cody's mother said, her voice high-pitched, overly bright. Boys at this age, sometimes they don't know how to handle their curiosity. And that pair of scissors just happened to accidentally show up in his backpack. Jaylen's father countered, his voice low but firm. My son is not an experiment. Curiosity is not a license to humiliate someone. Principal Simmons looked at Jaylen, then at Cody. He let out a slow breath. We've reviewed the hallway camera footage. What happened in the locker room was serious. Cody will be suspended for 10 days, and the case will be referred to the Disciplinary Review Board for further action. The air thickened. No one said anything at first. Jaylen remained still until his mother reached out, resting a hand on his shoulder, giving it a gentle squeeze. You okay? She whispered. Jaylen nodded slowly. I just want to go home. That afternoon, the news spread faster than the school's Wi-Fi signal. A short clip of Jaylen walking out of the principal's office, head held high, back straight, began circulating on TikTok, captioned, "This boy endured what no one should have to, and still walked like a warrior." Cody, on the other hand, went silent. His Instagram went private. Friends stopped tagging him. The once loud laughter in the hallways softened, as if everyone was suddenly relearning a lesson about limits, respect, and consequences. But the story wasn't over, and Jaylen, though still carrying an open wound on his head, had already begun writing the next part of his own. He stood in front of the mirror in his bedroom, gently brushing the spot where the dreadlock used to fall, an empty space now, visible only to him. The afternoon light spilled across the hardwood floor, casting a muted stillness over the room. The ache wasn't just about the missing hair. It was something deeper, lodged in a place words couldn't quite reach. His father walked in, holding 2 glasses of lemonade. He set one down on the nightstand and sat on the edge of the bed, quiet for a moment before speaking. I'll never forget the first time a police officer called me by a name that wasn't mine, he said, voice slow, deliberate. Not because he didn't know my name, but because he didn't care to. Jaylen looked up. His father rarely talked about his younger years, and when he did, it usually meant something important was coming. My father didn't fight back that day, he continued, not because I was scared, but because I knew there's only one thing greater than anger, and that's the value of self-respect. People might touch your clothes, your hair, but don't let them touch the way you see yourself. Jaylen nodded slightly. I didn't think it would make me this sad. Sadness is good, his father smiled. It means your heart's still working the way it should. But after sadness, we have to do something with it. Use it to make something better. The next day, during the school assembly, Principal Simmons surprised everyone by inviting Jaylen to come up on stage. He hesitated at first, then stepped up, each step steady and sure. No microphone, no prepared speech. I just want to say, Jaylen began, his voice low but clear. Don't stay silent when someone makes you feel small for who you are. Silence doesn't protect anyone. It just helps the wrong people keep being wrong. The room fell completely silent. And then someone started clapping. Then another. Soon, a wave of applause rippled to the rows of seats. Not because Jaylen had said something grand, but because he stood there. And that alone was enough to make a school start learning how to see one another with respect again. A week after the assembly, Something had changed at Riverview Olivia. Cody, the boy who had once cut Jaylen's hair without consent, no longer showed up in the cafeteria at lunchtime. A message from the school administration confirmed. He had been suspended for 10 days due to severe harassment and would be required to attend a discrimination awareness session before returning to class. But Jaylen didn't need punishment to feel at peace. What mattered more to him was the shift in the eyes of students who used to stay silent, now looking at him like he stood for something more than just words. In art class, Ms. Bailey asked the students to draw a picture of the self you want the world to see. Jaylen chose to draw himself, with one side of his hair shorter, unhidden, unedited. He painted the remaining dreadlocks as flowing lines, curling upward into the shape of a tree growing from dry, cracked earth. When Ms. Bailey asked why, Jaylen replied, "Because from the part that got cut off, I learned I'm still growing." After class, a girl named Elena, a quiet student with Mexican roots, approached him shyly. "I've never seen anyone stand up the way you did. I have a little brother. His hair's like yours. I used to be scared someone might do the same to him, but now I think he'll be okay. If there's someone like you out there." Jaylen just smiled. No words needed. That evening, sitting out on the porch with his dad, Jaylen asked, "Do you think people can change?" His dad looked out at the Texas sky turning violet, then nodded. "If they see enough of what's right, and enough people willing to stand up for it." Jaylen rested his head against a railing, the weight in his chest finally lifting. He knew he couldn't erase every act of bias in the world, but he could be part of what made people rethink it. Even at just 13, he understood. True strength isn't found in retaliation. It's in refusing to let anyone else define your worth. And that was a lesson he would carry with every step and every remaining strand of hair.